She threw all my clothes outside, right into the yard, in front of the neighbors. I stood there, trembling, watching each piece of clothing flutter in the wind as my daughter-in-law shouted, "This old junk doesn't belong in my modern house." 3 days later, she was the one crying. Her $5,000 wedding dress gone. I didn't say a word. I just looked up at the sky and smiled. Because sometimes, justice doesn't need to shout, it just needs time. If you've ever witnessed the conflicts between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law, subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tay to hear more family drama stories that make you think. And comment where you're watching from so I know how far this story travels across the world. When Daniel married Mia, I truly believed my life would finally be peaceful. After my husband passed away, I moved in with my son to help with cooking and cleaning. The 2-story house, bright and cozy with a small garden, was the pride of our family. I thought it would be a home, but I didn't know it would become the place where I learned to endure humiliation in silence. At first, Mia acted sweet and respectful. She called me Mother Helen, cooked with me, smiled politely. I even gave her my wedding ring, saying, "May you always be as happy as you are today." But just a few weeks later, when the laughter faded, I realized she didn't need a mother, she needed a maid. It started with little things. "Don't leave your shoes there, it looks messy." "Please don't cook that, Daniel doesn't like the smell of onions." "Can you use the laundry room later? I'm recording a video right now." Each word seemed light, but over time, they burned like drops of acid on ice, slowly eating away my dignity. I tried to keep the peace. I cleaned, cooked, and stayed quiet when she complained. I thought if I endured, my son would be happy. But I was wrong. Silence often makes others step further. One morning, after I finished washing clothes, Mia walked in, her tone cold. "Did you use our washing machine? I've told you so many times your old clothes make mine smell bad." I froze, hands dripping with water. "This washing machine belongs to my son, too." She sneered. "No, it's mine. Daniel bought it with my money." That sentence, so casual, cut deep. I wasn't angry, just hollow inside. That evening, Daniel came home. I thought he'd understand. But when I told him, he simply said, "Mom, Mia just wants the house tidy. Don't take it too seriously." I stayed silent. In his eyes, I was no longer the woman who raised him, just an old lady causing trouble for his wife. Day by day, the house grew suffocating. Meals were silent. The clatter of dishes sounded like metal on stone. Mia started locking the pantry and the fridge. She said it was privacy. I learned to eat less, cooking small meals for myself in a corner of the kitchen. No one asked if I was tired. No one noticed when I coughed. Then one evening, I overheard her on the phone. Mia laughed sharply and said, "I swear I'll kick her out soon. Daniel's too soft, but I have my ways." I stood in the hallway, hands shaking, the teacup slipping from my fingers and shattering on the floor. I'd heard many family drama stories about mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law, but never imagined I'd become one. Her words echoed all night. "Kick her out of the house." The next day, she smiled sweetly and handed me a glass of juice. "You should rest more, don't overwork yourself," she said kindly. I smiled back, already knowing it was a farewell. 3 days later, while I was out shopping, she did exactly what she promised. When I came home, the garage door was open, my bags scattered across the yard, clothes strewn under the sun. Mia stood there, arms crossed, voice sharp. "I told you, this house needs to be cleaner. Your old stuff makes me sick." I stood still, staring at the belongings I had cherished for years. Sweaters I had knitted for Daniel when he was little, now thrown like trash. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Because I can. This is my house," she said, not blinking. I looked at Daniel standing by the doorway. He stayed silent, eyes averted. The breeze blew gently, carrying dust and sunlight. I gathered my things carefully, like collecting fragments of my past. No one helped. No one apologized. When I left, the sky broke into rain. I carried a few clothes, some savings, and a small notebook, my late husband's journal. I never looked back. That night, in my small rented room, I opened his old journal. On one yellowed page, he had written, "Whoever disrespects their mother will never know peace." I smiled faintly. Perhaps fate was opening a new chapter for me, a quiet one, but just... In that tiny room, I hung my clothes neatly, arranged my things, and felt a calm strength grow inside. People can take your house, your status, but not your dignity. And I knew what's thrown away often finds its way back in the most unexpected way. As for Mia, she thought she'd won, but she didn't know. Just a few days later, when her wedding dress disappeared, everything would begin to crumble. If you've ever witnessed a story like this in real life, leave a comment telling me where you're from, because Voices of Auntie Tay wants to know how many hearts family drama stories can reach around the world. And don't forget to subscribe, because in the next part, every silence will have its answer. The next morning, I woke early as usual. Golden sunlight slipped through the curtains of my small room, my new beginning. I brewed a cup of black coffee, took a deep breath, and looked out the window. The narrow alley buzzed with traffic, yet somehow I felt peace, something I hadn't felt in my own house for years. But that peace didn't last long. About a week later, Daniel came to see me. He looked tired, his hair messy, shirt wrinkled. "Mom, why did you leave without saying anything?" I smiled gently. "Did you ask when they threw my things out?" He was silent. "You live in that house," I said softly, "but did you ever hear me sigh?" He looked down, saying nothing. I knew he was trapped between two women, his wife and his mother. But sometimes, silence is also complicity. I didn't blame him. I just pitied my son, a grown man who still hadn't learned how to protect what's right. A few days later, I visited the house again, bringing some flowers I'd bought on the way. I didn't want anything back, just to plant a few pots near the porch, where Daniel and I once read together. But as I stepped into the yard, Mia was already there, arms crossed, eyes sharp as knives. "What are you doing here?" "I just wanted to plant some flowers by the corner. It gets good sunlight." "You have no right to be here anymore." Her voice was ice. I looked around. The old plants I'd tended were gone, replaced by expensive decorative trees. Mia continued, slow but venomous. "Daniel already said it, this house is ours. You should focus on your own old age." I bit my lip, forcing calm. But when she spoke again, I couldn't hold back. "Honestly, I pity you," she said. "You keep clinging to the past, thinking people still need you. It's time to move on, mother-in-law." That word mother-in-law dripped with contempt. It stabbed deeper than any insult. I looked at her for a long moment before replying softly, "You don't need to act rich to prove you're happy, dear." Mia smirked. "Are you jealous of me?" I turned away, saying nothing. But my heart ached. I had prayed every night for my son and his wife to live well, for laughter to fill their home. But I didn't realize that sometimes the things we pray for become the things that hurt us most. That afternoon, on the bus ride back to my room, a young woman sat beside me, crying on the phone. I caught a few words. "My mother-in-law hates me," I sighed quietly. Every family has its own story. Every mother carries a wound she never speaks of. And I realized family drama stories aren't just about others. They're mirrors reflecting how people treat one another, especially across generations. That night, as I rearranged my small closet, my hand brushed against an old wooden box. Inside were keepsakes, my wedding photo, a few birthday cards Daniel made as a child, and a folded document, our house deed. I froze. It clearly stated, "Owner, Helen Grace." I smiled faintly. I had forgotten the house was bought by my husband and me long before Daniel got married. Later, I added his name for convenience, but the ownership still belonged to me. I sat in silence for hours, feeling both sad and clear. I could take the house back and make them pay immediately. But I didn't want to act out of anger. I wanted them to realize the value of what they had despised. The next day, I met my lawyer, an old friend of my late husband. He looked at me and smiled gently. "You can remove them right away, Helen, but that's not who you are." I nodded. "No, I'll let them learn their own lesson. I just want everything cleaned up, literally." I hired a cleaning crew for the house, under my legal right. I kept all of Daniel and Mia's belongings neatly organized in a separate room. Before leaving, I placed a small envelope on the living room table and wrote, "A small gift. Hope you guard it as carefully as you guard this house." Then I quietly left. That night, I sat on the bed listening to the rain. I pictured Mia opening the envelope and smiled. Inside was a single slip of paper with just a few words. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a court, but from the hands of the one who was hurt. The next day, Daniel texted me. "Mom, Mia is furious. She says you touched her personal things." I replied, "I only cleaned like she once did to me." There was a long silence. Finally, a short message. "Mia's wedding dress is missing." I looked at the screen, my hand slightly trembling. Not from fear, but because I knew the real storm was just beginning. In family drama stories, consequences don't arrive with shouting, but in the moment, the one who caused the hurt must face their own shadow. I put the phone down and closed my eyes. There was nothing more to say. What will come, will come. And that wedding dress was only the beginning. If you've ever been hurt, yet stayed calm like Mrs. Helen, comment where you're watching from so I know where this story has reached. Don't forget to subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tay to follow more family drama stories that move the heart, where justice sometimes arrives in silence, not revenge. That night, after Daniel texted about the missing wedding dress, I sat by the window for a long time. Rain pattered softly. The sound on the tin roof matched my slow, steady heartbeat. I felt neither smug nor pleased, just that everything was returning to its rightful place. I've lived long enough to know, sometimes silence is the loudest roar. When people think you are weak, you only need to step back, not to run away, but to give them enough space for their own regret. Mia called me the next morning. Her voice shook, unlike her usual arrogance. "Mrs. Helen, did you take my wedding dress?" I answered calmly. "Me? I don't even have space to hang my own clothes, let alone keep your dress." "Don't lie," she shouted. "You were the last one in the house yesterday. I know you have a spare key." I smiled slightly. "I only cleaned, Mia. Just like you once cleaned me out of that house. Everything's tidy now." She went silent, then hung up. I wasn't lying. I truly had cleaned just not the house, but the self-respect that had been stained. A few days later, Daniel came to see me, looking exhausted. "Mom, I'm sorry for what happened, but did you really take Mia's dress?" I looked straight into his eyes. "My son, I once guarded what mattered most this family, and people threw it away. Now a dress is missing, and you immediately suspect your mother?" Daniel said nothing. I knew he was torn between loyalty and truth. I placed my hand on his shoulder, gently. "Sometimes you must lose what you treasure to understand its worth." Then I poured hot tea and invited him to sit. He held the cup, his hand shaking slightly. "Mom, I don't know what to do between you two." I said, "You don't need to choose a person, just choose what's right." He lowered his head. I looked at my son, the man who was once my pride, now weak, trapped in a marriage swollen with pride. I knew if I lashed out, he'd side with his wife, but if I stayed silent, time would stand with me. So I chose silence. After that, I began to change. Each morning, I woke early and walked through the local market. I bought fabric and mended old clothes for poor women. The work soothed my heart. Perhaps the only path to healing after being hurt is to help others heal. I set up a small corner in my apartment to teach women basic sewing so they could earn a little income. They told me their family stories, bitter, tearful family drama stories. One was thrown out by her mother-in-law. Another said her daughter-in-law treated her like a maid. I listened without judging, without lecturing. Because I understand, contempt inside a family doesn't always come from bad people. Sometimes it comes from those who have never been hurt, so they don't know how to value others. One day, while I was teaching, I received a letter from the law office. Inside were copies of the property title and noticed that the legal transfer back to me was complete. The house had, in law, returned to its true owner. I looked at the papers and felt strangely calm. I had no intention of evicting anyone. I only wanted them to know they were living under someone else's kindness, not their own power. That evening, I wrote a letter to Mia. "This house is not just a place to live, it holds memories. You chose to clean it out but stained your own heart. I hope you realize soon that no one wins in a war among family." I folded the letter and put it in an envelope. I added a small receipt from the Grace Home Women's Shelter Laundry Center. At the bottom I wrote, "A small gift, please keep it well." Then I sent it. A few days later, I heard news from a friend. Mia had gone to that center looking for her wedding dress. The manager said an older woman had donated a beautiful wedding gown to be given to poor brides. They had hung it in the window with a small sign, "Gifted by a woman to remind us that love is not in the dress, but in how we treat one another." Mia cried. I was told she stood before the dress for a long time, then left without a word. As for me, I didn't feel happy or sad, just relieved. Because sometimes, to help someone understand, you don't need to shout, you just let them face the results of their own actions. A week later, Daniel visited again. "Mom, Mia knows everything now. She really regrets it." I smiled at my son. "Good. Then let's stop blaming. When someone feels shame, it means they still have a conscience." He held my hand. "I'm sorry, Mom." I shook my head lightly. "It's all right. We all need lessons. The question is whether we're brave enough to learn them." He nodded, eyes red. For the first time in months, I felt a real hug from him. In that moment, I knew I had won, not through revenge, but by making them look at themselves. I share this story not to seek pity. I only want to say that in family drama stories, justice doesn't always arrive through shouting, courts, or power. Sometimes it comes from the silence of the one who was hurt, the kind of silence that makes others finally listen. If you believe silence can be the strongest answer, comment where you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. And remember to subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tay to watch Part 5, where the true emotional storm hits, and the final lesson brings everyone to tears. I remember that afternoon very clearly. Golden late-day sunlight streamed through the small window and stretched across the table. I was mending a blouse for a poor woman from the market when my phone rang. An unknown number. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. "Mrs. Helen?" The voice on the other end was choked. I recognized it immediately. It was Mia. "Yes, it's me." A long silence followed only her heavy breathing. "My wedding dress." She paused. "I've seen it. In not Falzen reproces." I said nothing, only smiled faintly. "Where did you see it?" "At the Women's Charity Center." Mia's voice trembled. "I went there and they said you sent it." I answered calmly, "I only returned what no longer belonged to me. You once said you wanted the house clean, so I helped you clean it literally and figuratively." Silence again. I could feel her quick, uneven breaths. Then Mia burst into tears. No arrogance left, just broken sobs. "Do you hate me that much?" "I don't hate anyone," I said slowly. "I've only learned to put everything back where it belongs. Some things lose value the tighter we cling to them. Like that dress, when you thought it mattered more than the person who gave it, it lost its meaning." Through tears, she said, "I just wanted everything my way." I softened my voice. "Everyone does, Mia, but sometimes the price is too high." I heard her sob harder. It was no longer the voice of a proud woman, it was someone who realized she had just lost something that can't be retrieved. A few days later, Daniel came to see me. His face was gaunt, shirt wrinkled. "Mom, I don't know where to begin." I motioned for him to sit. "Mom," Mia cried all night. "She said you taught her the biggest lesson of her life." I stayed quiet. He went on. "She said when she saw the wedding dress hanging among the used clothes with the sign, 'Let the past be washed clean,' she understood. She had thrown away what was most precious, not the dress, but respect." I looked at my son and managed a tired but warm smile. "See, Daniel, sometimes a mother doesn't need to shout to be heard. One action deep enough makes people quiet down and listen." He held my hand, eyes wet. "I'm sorry for letting you bear this alone." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Don't apologize. We all go wrong when we love and forget about fairness." That afternoon, Mia came to see me. She was dressed simply, no makeup, no heels, just an ordinary woman with eyes less proud than before. When she stepped in, I kept sewing and didn't look up. "Mrs. Helen." Her voice was small and weak. "I know I was wrong." I set the needle down and looked up. "What wrong, Mia?" "Wrong for not respecting you, for thinking that money and power in that house gave me the right to look down on others, for forgetting that you made the man I married." I went still. That simple truth seemed to stop time. I wasn't angry anymore. I felt sorry for her. Sorry for a young woman swept up in modern illusions, that happiness can be bought, that love lives only in appearances. I stood, walked to a small cabinet, and took out a wooden box. Inside is my wedding ring set. I meant to give it to my daughter-in-law, but perhaps it was too soon before. Now it's the right time. Mia burst into tears and knelt, holding my hands. I patted her shoulder gently. "Don't cry. Tears don't change the past, but if you can cry, it means you can still feel remorse." We sat together for a long time. No longer mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but two women who had hurt each other and were learning to forgive. That evening, Daniel drove me home. When I stepped in, the kitchen felt familiar, and the smell of baked goods filled the air. Mia was there. She turned and gave me a small smile. "Would you like some apple pie? I made it using your recipe." I smiled and nodded. For the first time, laughter returned to a house that had known only silence. I didn't ask what they had learned. I didn't need promises. Just by the way they looked at each other, gentle, respectful, I knew the lesson ran deep enough to change their lives. That night, back in my small apartment, I opened the window and looked at the sky. Moonlight slipped through the curtain, soft as my late husband's hand on my shoulder. I whispered, "My dear, it's finally done. They understand." I took out the old journal and wrote the final lines. Today I realize justice is not something we must seize, it comes naturally when we know how to be silent at the right moment. Sometimes a single small act like placing a wedding dress where it truly belongs is enough to change someone's entire world. I closed the journal and smiled. Outside, the night breeze blew gently. I knew my story, like so many family drama stories, is not only pain, but the growth of hearts that were once hurt. If this story made you cry or think, comment where you're watching from so I know how far it has reached. And subscribe to Voices of Auntie for more family drama stories, where we learn to forgive, rise again, and find the voice of kindness. Since the day the wedding dress was restored to its true meaning, that house has completely changed. No more arguments, no hurried footsteps, no cold stares. Instead, there's the smell of baked goods each morning, soft music as Mia tidies the kitchen, and Daniel's laughter as he looks through old photos. I still live in my small apartment, but sometimes they invite me over on weekends. At first I was hesitant, but when I saw the sincerity in Mia's eyes, I knew there was nothing to fear. One afternoon, I visited and found her hanging the wedding dress on a wooden frame in the living room, not to show off, but as a keepsake, a reminder. On the frame, she had placed a small brass plaque. "Forgiveness makes love bloom again." I looked at it and nodded gently. She didn't speak, but I understood she had truly grown. After dinner, Daniel poured me tea. "Mom," he said softly, "I thought I had lost you forever, but it turns out that lesson showed me how wrong I was." I smiled. "No one truly loses anyone, son. Sometimes we just have to travel very far to find what was closest all along." Mia came from the kitchen with apple pie, smiling shyly. "I still use your recipe. Even after many tries, mine isn't as good as yours." I laughed. Sometimes the secret isn't in the recipe, but in the heart. Warmth settled over the house. I felt like I was back in the peaceful years when love was simple and no one had to fight over right and wrong. A few weeks later, I invited them to the women's center where I teach sewing. Mia was surprised to see women stitching and chatting happily. A young woman came over and held my hand. "Thank you. Because of you, I have work and the courage to start over." I smiled. "No need to thank me. We're just mending what's been torn." Mia stood beside me, eyes shimmering. On the way out, she said, "I used to think strong people are the ones who argue back. Now I know real strength is staying silent at the right moment." I looked at her and replied gently, "You know, family drama stories like ours aren't only tears, they're hope. If just one person chooses to stop, the cycle of hurt ends." She nodded and smiled, as if she finally understood the meaning of it all. Autumn arrived. I began rewriting this story in my notebook, not to accuse anyone, but to remind myself, kindness lasts longer than anger. I wrote, "When my daughter-in-law threw my things out of the house, I thought I'd lost everything. But when she found the wedding dress, I understood sometimes we have to lose something to get the chance to begin again." The day I finished the notebook, Daniel and Mia came to visit. They brought a painting hand-drawn of the three of us. Under it was a line, "Home isn't a place, it's a heart that forgives." I looked at the painting and couldn't hold back my tears. If my husband were still alive, he would have smiled. One evening, while the three of us were having tea, Mia suddenly asked, "Mother Helen, if you could go back, would you do it differently?" I was quiet for a moment, then answered, "No." If I had shouted, we would never have understood each other. I chose silence not because I was weak, but because I believed time is the best teacher. Again. She lowered her head and held my hand tightly. It was a grip of gratitude, reconciliation, and souls that had stopped hurting each other. As I left, the sky sparkled with stars. The cool night breeze brushed my silver hair. I felt light inside, no more resentment, no more hurt, only peace. I understood that sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't making others suffer, but waking them up. And to do that, you need a heart strong enough to forgive. I smiled and whispered into the wind, "Thank you, life, for giving me the chance to teach and to learn my own lesson." The next morning, I opened the window and sunlight poured in. On the table was a small bouquet from Mia. The note simply said, "Thank you for teaching me to love without hurting." I touched it and felt warm inside. In the end, life returned to me the most precious thing, not the house, not the assets, but peace of mind. My story ends here, but I believe there are many mothers and daughters-in-law out there still lost in their own family drama stories. If you're in a relationship that exhausts your heart, remember, you don't have to win, you just need peace. Sometimes, silence and compassion are the most beautiful answers we can give to life. If you believe forgiveness is not weakness but strength, comment where you're watching from so I'll know how far this story has traveled. And don't forget to subscribe to Voices of Auntie for more family drama stories that show hurt is not a period, but the start of a kinder heart. Time moved slowly. Winter came and went. Spring returned, bringing the scent of new blossoms on my small balcony. My life is simple now. A morning cup of tea, a few flowers I tend, and afternoons teaching sewing to women who've stumbled mid-journey. Sometimes people ask me, "Mrs. Helen, aren't you angry after all they did?" I just smile. If I were still angry, how could I live in peace? Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means we no longer let the past control our hearts. And I, once the woman thrown out with her clothes, now feel lucky. Without that storm, I'd never have learned to love without needing anyone to be perfect. One Saturday morning, Daniel and Mia visited with a small card. "Mom, we want you at our 5th wedding anniversary." I looked at them, two people once on opposite sides, now holding hands, smiling together. I nodded. Of course, but don't make it too big. Anniversaries aren't about money, but sincerity. Mia smiled. I know, and I prepared something special for you. On the day, the house was decorated with white flowers. No cold light like before, only warm candlelight and honest laughter. In the middle of the party, Mia held the mic, her voice trembling. Today I don't just celebrate our marriage. I want to honor the woman who taught me the greatest lesson about love and compassion. She turned to me, eyes shining. Mrs. Helen, thank you. Without you, I'd still be a selfish woman who thought only of herself. I was stunned. Applause filled the room. I didn't need to say anything, I just held her hand and nodded. Mia placed a small box on the table and opened it. The old wedding dress. But now it had been shortened and tailored into a simple, pure white evening gown. I altered it, she said. So every time I wear it, I'll remember that real love doesn't need to show off. It only needs to fit the heart. The hall fell silent. I smiled the most genuine smile I'd had in years. After the party, Daniel drove me home. In the car, he held my hand. Mom, I read your journal. I didn't know you wrote so beautifully. I laughed. Writing is how I talk to myself when no one else is listening. He was quiet, then said, I want to publish it as The Wedding Dress That Disappeared, a gift to you. I believe your story will help others heal. I looked at my son, my heart tight. Not from emotion alone, but because I knew he finally understood. Kindness isn't weakness, it's the strength that changes people. A month later, the little book was printed. It wasn't sold, only given to women who came to my center. On the cover, a white wedding dress billowing in the wind, with the line, a family drama story of love, pain, and redemption. Women took the book, read, and cried. They told me, your story is our life. Ah, I just smiled gently. I don't tell stories to be pitied, but so someone will believe that no matter the hurt, we can still rise with our own hearts. One afternoon, while I watered the flowers, Mia stopped by with a soft-scented bouquet of lavender. I know you love this fragrance. I put it in a glass vase on the table. She sat and said quietly, there were times I thought you would never forgive me, but today, seeing your peace, I understand forgiveness doesn't need to be spoken. It's in the way you look at me, in your gentle smile. I nodded and held her hand. Because I was once someone who needed forgiveness too. Which of us hasn't been wrong? We sat together in silence, listening to the evening birds. 2 generations, 2 women who once hurt each other, now only understanding remained. That night, I opened my computer and wrote my story for the Voices of Auntie channel, for anyone living in a heavy home, weary from wounds, unsure how to begin again. I wrote, if you've been hurt by the very people you call family, don't rush to strike back. Step back a little, let them see themselves. What we lose today may be what helps us find ourselves again. This isn't only my story. It's one of countless family drama stories where kindness wins over pain. I posted the video and closed my eyes. I didn't need to know the views or comments. Touching even one heart would be enough. The next day, when I opened YouTube, hundreds of comments appeared. Some from the Philippines, some from Vietnam, some from Canada. People wrote, I watched and cried. Thank you for sharing. I was also looked down on by my daughter-in-law, but now I know what to do. Said Frank's 17. Your story makes me want to hug my mother for a long time. I read each line, my eyes blurring. My private pain had become a bridge between distant hearts. And that is the most beautiful thing I've ever done. If this story touched you, comment where you're watching from so I'll know how far a mother's voice has traveled. And please subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tay for more family drama stories, tales that may bring tears, but also help you find faith in love again.